Hello, this is Mrs. Taylor, and I'm going to walk you through how to solve an absolute value equation. In this example, we have 5 plus 3 times the absolute value of 3f plus 4 equals 20. And when we did these in class, the one thing that we needed to keep in mind, well, there are two things. The first thing is if I'm solving an absolute value equation, the first thing I want to do is move everything outside of the absolute value bars to the opposite side of the equal sign. So I need to move this 5 and this 3 to the opposite side. The second thing we have to keep in mind is there are two solutions to absolute value, because absolute value is the distance from 0, and there are two numbers that are the same distance from 0. So, to start with, let's talk about how to move this 5 and 3. As with solving any equation, you always want to start with adding and subtracting first. So, I want to move everything I can by adding and subtracting. Here's a couple of common errors that happen with these types of problems. First common error is a lot of students think that they can add 5 plus 3. But you have to remember the order of operations. Remember, the order of operations say you have to multiply and divide before you can add and subtract. And so if I were plugging in a number for f and evaluating this, I would have to do 3 times whatever I get in the absolute value before I can add the 5. And so what that means when I'm solving is that I can't combine the 5 and 3. I have to use division to move the 3 to the opposite side, because I have to multiply it first according to the order of operations. Second common error here is a lot of students want to distribute the 3 into the absolute value bars. And the problem with this is it completely negates the absolute value bars, because once you distribute, you drop the bars, and so you wouldn't have the same value because you've taken away the absolute value bars. So the way we want to approach this is, first we want to move the 5 by adding or subtracting, because that's what it's doing on this side. And then we move the 3 by multiplying or dividing, because that's the operation that's happening on this side. So move the 5, it's positive, so I would subtract it first. And once I subtract, I'm left with 3 times the absolute value of 3f plus 4 equals 20 minus 5, which would be 15. The next thing I want to do, oops, I forgot to change that 20 to a 15. Okay, the next thing I want to do is move the 3. And it's 3 times the absolute value. So to move the 3, I need to do the opposite, which would be to divide. Once I simplify, my 3's would cancel, because 3 divided by 3 would just be 1. And on the right, 15 divided by 3 would be 5. So now that I have removed everything outside the absolute value bars from the left side of this equation, now I can take into consideration the fact that 3f plus 4, whatever value I plug in for f, if I get positive or negative 5, once I take the absolute value, it would still equal 5. So I'm going to break up this equation into the two cases, where what's inside the bars could equal 5, or what's inside the bars could equal negative 5. Another good thing to get in the habit of checking at this step is for negatives. And by that I mean, if the absolute value, once you've moved everything outside of the bars to the opposite side, if it equals a negative constant, your answer is no solution, because remember, absolute value is distance from 0, and so it can never be negative. And so be careful with that and pay attention to the number that you get over here on the right side, because if it's negative, just write no solution and move on. Alright, so we're going to break this up into the two cases. And then once I've done that, I can solve them individually. And so I would subtract 4 and divide by 3 on both of these equations. And so once I completed those steps, my solutions would be f equals 1/3 and f equals negative 3. And it's always a good habit to check your answer. And the way I would do that is by substitution. And so I would take my solutions and substitute them back into the original equation. And I can use my calculator to do that. So my first solution that I found was f equals 1/3. So typing in the equation I have here, 5 plus 3 times the absolute value. So if you're looking for absolute value, you go to the math menu and you want to be in the number menu. So move over to the right. The first option is absolute value, option 1. And then I just type in 3f, which I'm replacing with 1/3. So I always use parentheses when I'm plugging in a value. So that would be 3 times 1/3 plus 4. That's my entire equation. Hit enter, and it's 20, which it's supposed to equal 20. So I know that's the solution. If you don't feel like typing everything over again to check your next solution, you can hit second enter. It will give you the equation again. And so then you just move your cursor over to where you substitute in the value. This time it's -3. You can just type over what's there, and then if you have any extra, you can delete it. So now I have the entire equation with -3 plugged in. Press enter, and it equals 20 as well. So I know my two solutions are correct. And that's how you would solve an absolute value equation.